Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. We are now done with NBA, talked a lot about the games from last night. Now we are going to move on to the NFL here, where we're going to start out by saying some of the definitive deals that have been taken place in the past 24 hours since our last show. That includes the Bears and cornerback Jaylon Johnson agreeing to a long-term deal. Johnson was franchise tagged by Chicago on Tuesday right ahead of the deadline. They did not want him to hit the open market, but clearly the two sides were not all too far off in terms of their negotiations, and the Bears get to retain their top cornerback. The deal is worth $76 million over the course of the next 4 seasons, is a guaranteed $54.4 million. Johnson is just 24, and he's coming off of the best season of his career, where he was All-Pro second team. And for a Bears team that coming into the season didn't seem like they had too much going on as far as cornerstones on the defensive side of the ball, they have been able to sort of shape themselves up into a better position. Jaylon Johnson, in the emergence that he had this past season, they end up trading for Montez Sweat, and he was tremendous for them down the stretch of the year. They also signed guys in the past couple seasons like Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards to hold down their linebacking core, and I am a huge fan of safety Jaquan Brisker. I think that he hits hard, he's really big in the run game, and really stands out. He missed some games last season, him and Kyler Gordon as well in the secondary, but overall this team is sort of shaping into being a more competitive franchise, and I think that that's just sort of something to keep in mind when we talk about this whole off-season conversation with the Bears in terms of should they keep the number 1 overall pick, should they trade down. I feel like they have been trending upwards since about the halfway point of last season, and it started honestly a little bit around the time they did trade for Sweat. Not that I think that Sweat was the end-all be-all of it. They still have holes to fill. I still wouldn't put them higher than 3rd in the NFC North, but I don't think that they are quite as far away as I felt headed into this season. And I do think that with the right quarterback, they could, work themselves into being a lot more of a competitive team. Now, I do understand the level of value they can get out of moving down potentially from the 1st overall pick and the 9th overall pick, but I also do think that they could go out and get a quarterback with the number 1 overall, reset that market. Caleb Williams is, in most people's eyes, the for sure number 1 overall guy. The ceiling that he has there, whoever they do decide to end up with at quarterback, though, I also think that they could use that number 9 pick. Maybe that's where they have a little bit more wiggle room and trade down, but I would also love to see them get a quarterback with the 1st pick, get another receiver with the 9th pick, and really shape up this offense. I think that would be a really exciting, at least for flashiness in terms of the excitement level you could build up headed into next season. Last year's offseason, there was a lot of buzz about Justin Fields potentially being a dark horse MVP candidate. I never bought into that. I could definitely buy a lot more into the idea of them headed into next season with a little bit more of a fresh start on offense and a team that is hungry to take that next step. But moving on from the Bears here, we got news that the Chiefs and linebacker Drue Tranquill agreed to a contract. They re-signed him for 3 years, $19 million. Tranquill was a nice rotational linebacker for the Chiefs this past season, played about 53% of their snaps, their defensive snaps that is, and again, was more of a rotational piece, but I did think that he helped them a lot in the Super Bowl run, and specifically stepping up the way that he did in the Buffalo game in the divisional round, where Willie Gay Jr. was injured early in that game and left. He was going into that matchup supposed to be the quarterback spy against Josh Allen. And not that Tranquill was shutting down Allen necessarily single-handedly, but I thought that he was able to step into the role and help be a real contributor for them. I do think that this probably means that Gay will be headed out of Kansas City this offseason. I would imagine he's a little bit younger than Tranquill. He's a little bit better than Tranquill. And his price range was just probably out of what Kansas City is able to pay, considering they still have to bring back defensive tackle Chris Jones. They've come out and they said that is their biggest priority for this offseason. So I think that it makes the most sense. Now, I'm curious whether or not Tranquill can take on a little bit of a bigger role for the Chiefs. He was a little bit in and out of the starting lineup just based on what types of defenses they were running. Can he be more of a bell cow guy, a workhorse guy for them going forward? We also have the Patriots re-signing tight end Hunter Henry. That was a 3-year, $27 million deal. For the Patriots here, they still have a lot of question marks really on their offense as a whole, but specifically at that quarterback position. And I do think that for as weak as their weapons are, I think that bringing Henry back is a positive for whoever's going to be back there at quarterback, where the tight end market for this offseason isn't really all too loaded, from the free agents themselves to the draft class, where Brock Bowers out of Georgia is the home run guy, but there's a lot of unknowns after him. In the free agent market, we had Dalton Schultz already go off the market. He was re-signed by the Texans a couple weeks ago. Other than that, there's really not all too much out there. Jonnu Smith was just signed as well. You have CJ Uzomah, Will Dissly, Austin Hooper, Noah Fant. So fine players, and ultimately, I think that they could have maybe gone a little bit cheaper and tried to pick up one of those other guys, but I also don't know if that was even a possibility. We'll have to see what those guys fetch in terms of contracts and free agency. Hunter Henry was incredible in his first season in New England, a big-time red zone threat, which they do not have on the roster. He caught 9 touchdowns for them in that first season in 2021. The issue, though, is the fact that they hardly got to the red zone the past couple years. At least took a step forward in that department this past season, but still, did they even though? I don't know. They've just been really struggling on offense as a whole. They have so many holes on that side of the ball, and I think that whoever is going to be playing quarterback is going to need all the help they need from the receivers, which isn't all too much at the moment, but the offensive line is also a mess, and I think that bringing back Henry is the right decision for them. We had the Rams re-signing guard Kevin Dotson, 3 years, $48 million. Dotson was traded from the Steelers to the Rams right after training camp wrapped up last season, and he turned in a very nice season for the Rams, who sort of righted the ship a little bit after a very disappointing 2022 season that, along with the injury to Matt Stafford, was also very much in jeopardy because of the fact that their offensive line really struggled. They couldn't get anything out of the run game, and Dotson works his way into a starter role for them, and he becomes the 4th highest paid guard in terms of annual salary. On the note of offensive linemen, we also had a contract extension between the 49ers and offensive tackle Colton McKivitz. $7 million for the next season. McKivitz is a fine option. I still feel like they could probably upgrade from him. $7 million is a fine number, I suppose, and it doesn't sound like they are going to be moving off of him necessarily. Now, he had a good season a couple of years ago. He was fine during the regular season last year. I just really didn't like how the postseason played out for him, but they clearly feel like there's still something that they can make work with him. Finally, to wrap up this segment, those are all the actual moves. We've talked a lot about Russell Wilson on this show as of late, so I wanted to sort of hold off on it for a bit. But we do have some news in terms of his meetings and such, where he is traveling to Pittsburgh today to meet with the Steelers. There's been tons of conflicting reports with the Steelers in terms of what they want to do with their quarterback position. Mike DeFabo, I hope I pronounced that right, is a Steelers beat reporter that works for The Athletic. He just reported a few days ago about the team had no interest in signing a veteran quarterback. The report specifically named Wilson, Cousins, and Baker Mayfield as some of those veteran guys they weren't looking to bring in. This wasn't the first time that a report with that same sort of sentiment came out, but now they are meeting today. We're still waiting on further updates, but it's interesting because Pittsburgh's GM, Omar Khan, was just at the Combine a few weeks ago, and he said that he still has full faith in Kenny Pickett. And, you know, I think that it's not crazy for them to roll into the next season with Kenny Pickett. I do think that as much as I like some of their skill position players, the offensive line was bad, and Matt Canada was a really bad offensive coordinator for them. So we'll see. I do still think that they should be looking to bring somebody in to make things competitive in that quarterback room and push Kenny Pickett a little bit harder. I'm curious with Russell Wilson. I feel like he could be a distraction in the locker room for a backup quarterback. Just, there's a lot of baggage there. He's very high profile, of course, and maybe he's better than Kenny Pickett. So in that case, you're trying to win games ultimately. And for the Steelers here, who haven't won a playoff game since 2016, that should be the priority. But I don't know. I still feel like Wilson is definitely past his better days. I would feel probably better about rolling into next season with Pickett over Russell Wilson. But at the same time, Wilson has expressed that he may be willing to take a veteran minimum deal, as he's still owed $85 million from the situation with Denver. So maybe it could be worth kicking the tires on. The Steelers aren't the only team that have expressed interest as of late. It also came out that he has talked to the Giants. Daniel Jones is still recovering from a torn ACL injury from this past season. Tyrod Taylor is set to become a free agent. So I think that would maybe make a little more sense to me for whatever reason. I know you're putting him in almost a bigger market with the Giants, but I feel like Kenny Pickett, you're still hoping you can develop a little bit. Daniel Jones, I feel like we mostly know how this is going to play out, that he isn't going to be the guy for the Giants long term. The team has an out in his contract following next season, so maybe this is the last we see of Daniel Jones. I feel like he's probably also still better than Russell Wilson, though, but I think he could also maybe handle having that backup quarterback in Russell Wilson a little bit better. Final couple notes here on the Steelers. I meant to mention, again, I do want the Steelers to go get somebody to compete with him in the locker room. I feel like it would make more sense for them, though, to go with a Gardner Minshew or Jacoby Brissett above Wilson. And finally here, the Raiders have also supposedly expressed interest in Wilson. and the team is expected to meet with Wilson at some point. But that is all we have time for on this subject. We're going to be taking our final break, and when we come back, we will be talking about the biggest storylines for the upcoming weekend. So stick with us. We will be right back.